As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
Welcome back, Reluctant Preppers. We're delighted to have a returning guest, Anne Barnhardt, founder of former Barnhardt Capital Management, outspoken activist who's been called a firebrand for the truth and for virtue in our world, is here with us today to talk with us about whether or not the hallmarks of our age signify that we are on the verge of collapse. Welcome to Reluctant Preppers, Anne.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And right off the top, let me apologize to the audience. I'm fighting bronchitis, and I have a bit of a cough, and my voice sounds kind of deep and raspy and funny, and I'm sure I'll be coughing throughout the interview. But I feel like $1 million, and I'm happy to be here with you, so let's get to it.
Well, we're certainly glad to have you here, and what I'd like with your help is for us to be able to walk through a rational examination of what would be the characteristics, just like any scientist would do. You say these are the measurable, quantifiable things that you would expect to see if certain facts were present. And we try to avoid sensationalism. We try to avoid running away with conspiracy theories on this channel because our listeners as a whole are reasonable, responsible people who are struggling very much they're swimming against the tide and against the currents of our popular media to try to become aware, to try to educate themselves, to try to prepare themselves so that they can be making responsible actions to help keep their families safe in every way. And if we look at our world today, we've had various guests on here who have sounded the alarm, saying a major collapse is coming. And sometimes that collapse has been focused primarily on the financial area and also about people's potential for breakdown of society if things like the supply chain and food supply, water supply get disrupted by a financial collapse. But I would like, with your help, if we could take a more systematic walkthrough of the characteristics and the attributes we would expect to see on a society, a global society on the verge of collapse. And if we could look at it from several different lenses, if we could look at it economically, militarily, politically, and then talking about constitutionality and adherence of the rule of law around that, morally and spiritually. So if that sounds like a course that we can examine together, we're ready.
Certainly. And let me start by saying I'm 100% with you. Something is terribly, terribly wrong here. And if we don't fix this, and if we don't pull our heads out of our respective you-know-wheres, we are going to suffer a total civilizational collapse. I'm absolutely with you. And I hope that people identify me as being not a loon conspiracy theorist, but rather a person who is dealing exclusively with these issues of objective reality and looking at these unsustainable paradigms, looking at how our culture is collapsing and saying, this has never happened before. We have to sound the alarm on this. One of the things that I like to reference, because a lot of times people say to me, well, Anne, you've been screaming and yelling about all this stuff now for years. And it's absolutely true. I've been screaming about this. I started screaming really loud when Obama usurped, because then, obviously the United States has been overthrown. There's going to be massive global consequences to this. And then all of the economic stuff, the massive money printing and so forth. But what I remind people is they say, well, we're still going. Where's this civilizational collapse that you've been talking about? People were calling Winston Churchill a conspiracy theorist, warmonger, et cetera, as he was constantly trying to warn the world about Hitler and the Third Reich, until literally the day that the tanks rolled in to Poland. I believe it was September 1st, 1939. So up until September 1st, 1939, Winston Churchill every day was being called a conspiracy theorist, loon, et cetera, et cetera. Why are you constantly browbeating Herr Hitler, so on and so forth. And there was actually tremendous sympathy for the Germans and for the Third Reich, even in England, all through the 30s. there was a tremendous pro-Nazi contingent there. And so nobody believed him, and he was insane until the tanks rolled into Poland. I don't know when these tanks are going to roll into Poland. What's happening now is so utterly unprecedented that there's no way anyone can say, well, it's going to all come apart on this and such a day. You know, the Dow is going to collapse and lose 5,000 points on this and such a date. Look, if anybody is trying to attach dates to any of this and saying, I know exactly how the future is going to unfold, the person is almost certainly a charlatan and should be disregarded immediately. If they're not a charlatan, they're just stupid. So I'm absolutely with you 100% on that. And again, as I've already alluded to, this situation that we are in globally. There is no precedent for this. There is no analog for this. The world has never been interconnected the way that it is today. Previously in history, for example, when the Roman Empire fell, okay, first of all, information travels at the speed of either a man walking or a horse. That's how fast information travels. When the Roman Empire collapsed, it was a long, slow, grinding collapse. Many people didn't even perceive a real significant change. Some people did, but most people out in rural areas, you know, being subsistence farmers and so on and so forth, not much in their life changed. Over the course of their, 40, 50, 60, 70-year lifespan within this multi-century, quote-unquote, collapse of the Roman Empire. That's not what this is going to be. This is information travels instantaneously. The entire world is interconnected. Up until now, there's always been somewhere to go, somewhere to flee to if a given situation in a given geographical area gets bad, people could move away from it and get completely and totally away from it. You cannot do that now. You cannot hide anywhere on the planet. This also feeds into the financial system and the events that I've been warning about, wherein they're now moving to eliminate cash altogether. There's a move in the United States. They're talking. I was actually in a train station the other day, and what was up on the TVs was CNN, and CNN was just blasting this propaganda about eliminating $100 bills. They are clearly right now moving to eliminate cash. The same is going on in Europe. They've already said they are going to eliminate the 500 euro note, and they also want to eliminate the 100 euro note. They are moving to eliminate cash. They want to get it so that you cannot be anywhere on this planet and do business, make any sort of financial transaction, do anything without being in this electronic monetary system.
And monitoring system.
Monetary and monitoring, well said. And so, again, this is completely unprecedented. World War II, Jews and other people also were fleeing out of Germany, out of Eastern Europe, fleeing and getting into the United States, getting into Canada, going into South America. Up until now, people have been able to basically disappear if they find themselves under an extremely hostile regime. People have been able to get away from that and move by and large. In this situation, there's nothing you can do. The entire system is interconnected. You can be tracked anywhere on the planet. How can you say that we can look to history to be informed by any of this? How can you say we can look to history to be informed about economic collapses when, again, back to the fall of the Roman Empire, they're still minting coins. They debased their coinage, they debased their money, but it was still physical commodity money. This business of having this money that is basically fictional, non-existent zeros and ones on computer servers, backed by the full faith and credit of governments which are, again, this is unprecedented as well, that are almost completely populated by diabolical narcissist psychopaths. Never before in human history has the political leadership been so thoroughly saturated with psychopaths.
And before we make the full transition to political risks and instability that we're on, which we are going to do next, I wanted to keep you just for a moment, if we could, on the economic point, which you opened up for us. That idea that never before have all of the currencies of the world been based on nothing but debt. I mean, that we've had a couple of guests making that point. And it's interesting because you pointed out, not to contradict the fact that people say history has rhyme to it, and that some of the ways that society was breaking down, or that things were being driven to extremes and to excesses in past empires. They say that empires have a life cycle, and when you get to that pre-collapse stage, that you can start looking for these hallmarks of entering the collapse, the exhaustion stage of empires. So there are some of those principles, but what I hear you saying overarchingly is, people, it's not that those principles don't exist. It's not that we aren't walking down some of those paths. It's that our world has changed so fundamentally from the instantaneous, the connectedness, the lack of privacy, the lack of anonymity, etc., that things can happen on a convulsively faster, instantaneous basis. And so things are going to be so much different now. You've never seen the likes of what can happen now from the past, because things are so different.
Absolutely, yes. And I think the analogy, and I've made this analogy many times before, is to think of it as like a 747, a jetliner, okay? So yes, we have this massive economy and this massive technology. And what that is the analog of is a heavy 747 at altitude, at 36,000 feet, at full cruising speed, 550 miles an hour. You have a tremendous amount of inertia. Okay, the world economically, not only because of the population, but because of the size of the economy and the productivity and what technology has enabled us to do and to produce, that we have this massive, massive economic and cultural inertia. But the other side of that is that when you are a 747 and you lose all of your engines and you lose your rudder and you lose your hydraulics, you can't just you can't just set it down, glide in and set it down in the nearest available cornfield. If you have something that's that big and has that much inertia, when you lose all of the engines and you lose your hydraulics, it's going to crash and probably everybody is going to die. Now, I'm not saying that everybody on planet Earth is going to die, but I am saying that, again, within the last 150 years, basically, the fact that nobody produces their own food or even knows how to produce their own food, if we are completely dependent upon shipping food across massive distances, which, let's face it, requires petroleum. Okay, what happens if the petroleum gets cut off? How do you feed these people? How do you purify water? Nobody knows how to purify water. Nobody knows how to provide any of the absolutely fundamental essentials for maintaining human life. Our houses are not built such that we can build fires and boil water. We don't have the ability to do that. You can't build a fire inside of your house. Where would you do that? You could go on and on. We are so incapable of providing the basics of survival for ourselves. It's so precarious. It's awesome as long as it's working. As long as the 747 is fully functional, it is one of the most breathtaking achievements of breathtaking human technological achievements. The thought that you can take off in an airplane in Chicago and fly nonstop to Tokyo over the North Pole, or something that's incredible. That's absolutely incredible. But if everything isn't working perfectly, much less if there's some sort of a mechanical catastrophe, it's going to end very, very badly. So there's always this give and take. That's how we are societally, economically, culturally. We had massive inertia, and now there are major, major mechanical malfunctions. And going back to the issue of economics, okay, you want to see one of the most glaring signposts economically that something is terribly wrong and we are heading towards an economic catastrophe. Negative interest rates. Negative interest rates. The outlying, if you have negative interest rates, if the bank is confiscating a portion of your demand deposits every month in order to keep your money in the bank, what that does is it disincentivizes banking and it incentivizes holding money in what is amusingly referred to as the Bank of Serta, like the Serta mattress company, meaning, hiding it in your mattress or in, a mayonnaise jar. Okay, the only way that the government, that the banksters, the oligarchy, the only way that you can keep people, forcing them to keep money in banks, in their system where they can control it, is if you outlaw cash. I saw this coming years ago. It's logic. How can they maintain control of the populace and maintain control of the financial system if they have to go into a negative interest rate situation in order to keep that debt pumping? And then how are you going to control people if everybody's dealing in cash? Well, you have to outlaw cash. And here we are right now. It's happening. It is happening. You can't, for me, when I declared my tax strike, and I've recounted this before, but one of the things that I was looking at is, okay, how am I going to rent an apartment? How am I going to do anything if I can't keep any money in a bank account? I can't work above board. I can't work over the table. I can only work under the table and be paid in cash. But wait a minute, you can't pay your rent on an apartment rental in cash anymore. You can't pay your bills in cash. You can't do anything in cash. What the heck am I going to do? And so what I was looking at for a while is buying a big SUV with cash, which I did, and then buying a travel trailer, and living in the travel trailer. Something else worked out, another option came to me, but that was initially what I was thinking of doing, because you can't go to an apartment complex anywhere. You can't legally rent anything. They ping your social security number immediately. And of course, my credit is utterly destroyed because I have IRS tax liens. And I had 2 foreclosures because I couldn't submit a tax return. And so Wells Fargo foreclosed on me, not because I had ever missed a payment, ever, or even been late. They foreclosed on me because I couldn't submit a tax return for compliance. Okay, if you're foreclosed upon, you're foreclosed upon. That destroys your credit. It's, again, through this economic, incestuous, everything connected. You cannot survive. You cannot live. Now they're just going after the very, very last remnants of this, and they want complete, total control, complete, total ability to track people at all times, and what that requires is outlawing cash. Cash is the last obstacle. And it was very interesting when I was watching the CNN propaganda. The argument that they were making is that $100 bills and cash are dangerous because drug dealers and criminals do business in cash. Well, you know what? So do honest, hardworking people.
That's right. The other 99% of the economy, right?
Exactly. So, but there was all this fear mongering. We have to do this to protect you. We have to do this to protect our society. How about, building a wall across the Mexican border so that armies, literal armies, mercenaries, invasion, colonizing forces are not streaming across the southern border? Spare me your lies about wanting to protect the people. Please, I don't know. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, but man, if there's anything to go to war over, if there's anything to start lodging mass protests, I've advocated for a while doing blockades in the major cities of the interstates and so forth. It's this business of trying to outlaw cash. If there's anything so far that's happened that's screamed out for civil disobedience up to the point of things like blockading interstates and protests like that, it's the outlawing of cash. If you allow them to do that, frankly, you deserve whatever you get.
And it does take away huge areas of people's freedoms and privacy and ability to transact with each other, to provide for their family. And you mentioned sort of the contrast of, we're doing this for your own good, but meanwhile leaving you completely exposed. So if we could turn the attention in that regard to military, what would it look like in a precarious, high-risk situation prior to a collapse militarily on a global basis? And are there things that we're seeing, signs of the times going on, whether it's from ISIS or nuclear Iran or North Korea ICBM tests or militarization of police? What do you consider to be the key destabilizing or high-risk areas militarily right now?